Hello and welcome to the first of a new series of videos, the Build from Scratch series. So with these ones, I'm going to be building an entire game from scratch, and it's going to be over the course of multiple videos. And so with these, I'm going to take a simple game, and then we're going to build that up piece by piece. And then we're going to look at ways where we can add to it and extend it beyond what might have been there in the original version of it. So this time around, we're going to be taking a look at the game Pong. It's an old classic one that you may have seen, where you have two paddles on either side of the screen, and you can control each. It's two-player one, so one player controls one paddle, one player controls another, or you could have an AI-controlled one, and there is a ball. And so you have to knock the ball, and the goal is to get the ball past the other player, and that's how you score a point, and then the first to a set number of points wins. It's a very simple game. You've got a ball bouncing around, you have paddles that you can knock that with, and we want to build that. We want to build that up from scratch. We want to make it a complete project. So we have all of those initial things like main menu, we have all of those elements there in the game. So that's what we're going to be building up. So let's get started with this. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the project. Now I am going to have this be a 3D one, and that's because there's a few visual effects that I want to add in later on that I think it's going to be more effective at being a 3D one. So although the game is strictly 2D and we will be keeping everything constrained to a 2D sort of movement, I just want to have that extra sort of visuals of it being 3D. So we're going to have that being created. While that's being created, let's start to talk about planning. So it is important when we're starting on projects to be doing planning. Now, in terms of how you go about planning the project, so if you look at how game development is taught formally in terms of institutions, so at higher education, things like that, what you will see is there is often specific processes and specific documents that you're asked to produce. So it might be a game design document, it might be things like a high concept document, and feature specs and tech specs. And with those documents, you might then look at those and then see, well, I look at documents from studios and they look nothing like this. And it's important to understand what the purpose is behind these documents. In particular, if you're working with them in an educational setting, what the purpose is there. So these documents have two purposes very specifically in education. And the first purpose is to guide your thought processes. So it's to have you think about things you might not have otherwise considered, and to try and sequence that, to have that happen in a way that naturally leads you through the process for considering all of the key elements. So that guidance, that learning process, outline things, is a key part of the purpose of those documents. The other purpose behind them, and this is the purpose that they mainly serve in industry, is to document the outcome of that, to document the decisions, the questions and the solutions that you have found to them, so that you can refer back to it, and also so that others can refer back to it. So they serve a purpose of communicating, both communicating to other people and communicating to your future self. So documentation and planning and noting that down is really important. Don't rely on just trying to keep it in your head. Our memories are fallible. We will forget things. We will, lose parts of the design in that process. So documenting the things is really important. And in part because that frees up our brain. If we're not writing it down, we have to keep remembering it, which means that's less room in our head for thinking of new things, for thinking of other ideas. So we want to note the stuff down. So let's look at sort of, for a project like of this, the kinds of planning I would often be doing. So, okay, well, we're making something that is going to be based off of Pong. So some key elements that we know we're going to have. So there's going to be a ball that moves around rectangular environment. We know we want it to be 2-player. And we want that to be either 1 human plus 1 AI or 2 humans. So we want to support both of those options there. And then we know that the player, or AI, can control a single paddle. So each player AI can control a single one, each player a single paddle. So we know we want that. And if ball hits wall behind player, then opponent scores a point. So the wall behind player 1, if the ball hits that, player 2 gets a point, and vice versa. So, okay, we want the ball bounces off of surfaces. Ball speed remains the same except when it hits the paddle. Because if the ball speed was able to always decrease, we could easily hit a scenario, if we imagine the ball's bouncing sort of primarily vertically, that it reaches a point where it just stops. So we don't want the speed to go down without there being intervention from a player or AI. So we want there to be elements of agency and control. And that's an important thing to consider when we're designing stuff. What are the elements that we are giving our players agency and control over? And so the ball speed is one that we want to have that happen with. And part of this, I'm trying to build this based upon my memories of playing Pong, because I played Pong. It would be 30 to 30, probably around 35 years ago. I remember playing Pong on it. My grandma had a CRT TV, because other types weren't around at that point, and playing Pong by connecting a console into that on the TV. So I remember very vividly playing that. So what I'd be building based off of that. So my recollection is that the paddle can control the speed to an extent, in that if the ball is moving up and the paddle hits it moving in that same direction, so if the vertical component essentially of the movement is the same, that can increase the speed, and the vertical component of the paddle is opposite, then it can slow it down. So paddle and speed up or slow down the ball. So if we hit while moving in same direction, increase speed, and then vice versa. So, okay, that works. We wanted to have winner is first to 5 points. And so if we think, okay, we know the arena, we know we're going to have multiple players, we know that we also can swap in an AI player as well. We know the mechanics in terms of what the ball's going to be doing, so that's pretty good. So we've got a reasonable sense of what's going to be happening there. So they're the key sort of design elements. So things that we know we're going to need. So the kind of assets. So the assets we're going to need. So if we think from an audio point of view, so audio, we're going to need ball hit wall. We might want a different sound for ball hit paddle, and being able to indicate whether that's speed up, speed down variance. So that might be a useful thing. Now, we might not need a different sound for that. We can potentially do that with just some pitch shifting. So if we have a hit paddle sound and we pitch it up, or pitch it down. That could indicate the speed change there. We want a goal scored sound. And we want a end of game sound. So that works. We could also swap in or add in some background music as well, but that gives us our audio. So we're just going to be using simple primitives with this, but we want materials. So in terms of materials, we're going to need one for the ball, one for the wall, one for the paddle, and one for the goal. Okay, so that gives us a decent set of materials. So this is one thing we spend our initial bit of time planning out what are the bits we're going to need, what are the design elements, and what are the sort of extra things there that we need in terms of assets, areas like of that. So it's a good starting set. So I think with this in mind, I'd feel comfortable starting to build bits. So let's get started. So first thing I want to do is scene-wise, well, I've already got my sample scene, but this is going to change to my main menu because I think I really believe in early on getting some of our key elements in there, things like of our main menu, our main level, getting that sequencing already happening from early on. So I'm going to have the main menu, I'm going to have another scene, and this is going to be my main level. So that's good. And I always want to make sure I remember when I'm setting these up right from the very beginning, add these in, make sure my main menu is top, so it loads first. So that's good. And then I'm just going to get set up a very basic canvas here, just so that I have the initial stages of this being set up. Because these are things that it's very easy to overlook, setting up stuff like main menus, being able to exit. And we miss those, and so it gets to the end of a project, and if it's something where you're rushing, you can get to the end of the project and then realize, oh, I haven't set up main menu, there's no way to exit, there's no thing indicating credits or stuff like that. And that can actually then take up quite a bit of time if you're setting those up. So plan out from the beginning to have those in there. Plan out to have your main menu and just get them set up initially. So menu canvas. So with this, I've already got the scaling set up. Now for the main menu, I'm going to get rid of, just want a nice solid black background. I think will look good for now. And we'll use similar in the main level as well because I want the arena environment to really sort of stand out there. So I'm going to, in my menu canvas, do my usual sort of setup where I've then got a panel that I'm going to position in the center. 400 feels a decent width. 300 is probably fine. So this is going to be, and actually I'm going to set up a couple of big panels here initially. So this is going to be the menu options, but I'm going to create a overall panel that is the main menu. Now this won't have an image, so I'm going to get rid of that because the idea is going to be I want to have multiple panels here, so one for the actual menu, and then one for the credits, for example, one for settings, being able to have things like of that. So just sort of planning a little bit ahead of, I know I'm going to have those options, so I'm just going to start with. And the reason I'm adding in a canvas group is canvas groups let you do fading. So they let me fade out an entire group, which means I can do stuff where I've got, I fade out the main menu and then fade in the settings, for example. So I'm not going to set up things like the settings and credits yet, but I'm just creating the opportunity for them to be added in. I will put in the panels for them though, just because I know I'm going to need that. So I might as well set them up now. So I'm going to have the settings and credits. But I'm just going to turn both of those off for now. So they're turned off. Got my main menu options. I know I'm going to bring in Text Mesh Pro because I'll be going to be using a bit of text in the game and I want it to look nice and crisp. So that's going to be the menu options there. Let's also chuck in a title. This one I want to bring up to the top, just so it's nicely positioned there. It's going to be there. Can span the entire width because it's going to be quite large in size. I reckon probably 75. It's going to be Pong 2021 edition. Let's make sure we've got our text nicely centered and let's ramp up the size a bunch. I think we offset that a bit from the top. That's better. I think that text needs to be way larger again. That's better. -50. So cool, we've got our title. We've got then menu options. We want to add in a button. And I think what we can do is we can encapsulate the different modes here. So this is going to be play, human versus human. And then I think we will also have a play, human versus AI. So human versus human. And a human versus AI. Now I want to make, I think, both of these a bit larger. Definitely want them to be a bit higher. That's a bit of a better height. I will use a vertical layout group, so I make a lot of use of layout groups. I'm a huge fan of layout groups. I think they make the process so much easier. So there we go. I want to put in a little bit of padding on this and a bit of spacing there as well. I think is good. And then I would, for now, because I might bring that image back, but I think for now I'll turn that off. So that's looking good. We've got our scenes. I'll set up a folder for scripts. Now, because we're starting to have a project that's a little bit larger, I would start actually grouping the scripts. So my main menu, I'm going to set up a script in here. It's going to be main menu UI. So the reason I'm doing this is just so that I know I'm going to end up with quite a few scripts. So I just want to have this a little bit more organized. So I'm going to bring in my main menu. And then we're going to set this up. Zoom in a little bit. That's a bit better. So we want to bring in Text Mesh Pro. Then, actually no, we don't need Text Mesh Pro because we're not. Actually, yes, there is a thing I want to do with this. So we'll see that in a moment. So serialized field, version display. Always a handy thing to put in there because if we think about this from the point of view of if we're getting bugs coming in. Now, if a bug that comes in is one that we believe we've fixed, it's really helpful to know what version the person saw it in so we know whether it's a case of, oh, okay, yep, you've got an older version, here's the latest version, grab that, and it will be sorted. Or if they've got the latest version, then you know, I haven't fixed that bug, there's more work to still be done. So really handy to have that in. So in start, I'm going to be able to say version display text is application. So there's this thing called application that lets you access some overall stuff for the project, which is really handy. So we can access our version. And just for niceness, I'm going to put the V in front of that. So then we're going to have on play, and this will be human versus human. Then we'll also have on play human versus AI. Now, for now, those won't do anything different, which is okay. We'll also want to be able to exit. So on quit. So again, things that it's easy to forget, because we can to quit, really easy. Just do that. So it's easy to forget to put in stuff like that of being able to quit. Those are important areas to make sure that we have set up. So we've got play, that's pretty good. Using Unity Engine Scene Management. So we'll be able to do Scene Manager, load scene. Now I'm not going to do a load scene async because these scenes are really simple, really quick. They will load very rapidly even on low spec devices. So just want to check that I've got the name right. So yep, main level, good. And both of these are going to do exactly the same. So there won't be any difference between them to start with, and that's intentional. That's what I want. Now I can add in my quit button as well, which will be good because we want to have that in. So exit game. This will be exit. Now with something like this, we might want to have a little bit more spacing between these so the exit is a bit more offset. There's a few ways we can do that. One of the easy ways for doing that is if we chuck in a panel here, then we can turn off the image on the panel. So we can turn this off or just actually remove that component. And then we can give it a width. It's a really easy way of just sort of putting in a spacer, essentially. So I'm just going to call that spacer. So that's good. Let's hook these things up. So we also we can group a bunch of these for hooking these up. Makes setting up some of the bits a little bit easier because they're all going to the same object. So then human versus human. On play human versus human. AI one, main menu, human versus AI, and then the exit game one. Now the exit game one we're not going to be able to test sort of directly in the editor because when you call the quit method in the editor, nothing actually happens, which is okay. It just gives us a way of knowing that stuff that we've got it set up there. We just need to remember that it's not going to be a bug when that's happening. So we've got our menu options, we've got a game title, that looks good. So let's finally add in another bit of text, version label, and link that up. So it's going to be linked up there. Now a version label, we want this anchored. Let's go for anchor on the left here. So it'll be 0, that will be 0 as well. I think we want a much smaller font with this. Let's go for 16. 20. Yeah, because I want it to be large enough that it's easy for people to read, so that they can, because this is something where we want people to easily be able to spot it. We want people to be easily able to read it because that's going to be stuff that we want them to be telling us. So let's check this out. We should have our version label populate, which we do, v.1. These should go to our levels, which they do. So let's just check then human versus AI as well. That does too. Excellent. So that's good. We've got our initial sort of setup there. So that means we've got those essential bits. So now we can start looking at our elements for the main level here of the pieces that we need. So first thing, going to again switch us over to just a solid background color, so that's good. And what I'm also going to do is, because there are packages that I know I am going to need, So let's bring in a few additional packages. So first thing that I definitely want to have brought in is the input system. So I want to build this using the new input system so that I can customize it to work with controllers, things like that. So I want that brought in. And I will also end up bringing in, so this needs to restart the editor, which is fine. So we'll let it do that. Because I'll then also bring in stuff like the post-processing, because I want, it's 2021 Pong, so it is going to have some post-processing in there. And for everyone, they will not be surprised that one of the things that I am so definitely finding a way to include in there is going to be a vignette. So there'll be a little bit of light vignetting added in there naturally. So we've brought in the new input system, which is good. That will mean that we need to go back to the main menu and do a little tweak there. That's fine. Cinemachine, I don't know if I'm going to need it. Yeah, I don't know for certain. I am going to bring that in though, just because, again, if I'm thinking from a point of view of a little bit of sort of future things I might want to add in, I might want to add in some kind of cool chase stuff with this, or being able to, have different cameras. So I think having Cinemachine in there will be handy. So brought that in. So that's good. And we do want post-processing, so we're going to bring in post-processing. So we'll have that in there. I can see there's an updated version of timeline, so that's one where I will absolutely bring in that, because in timeline for stuff like the main menu, transitions, areas like that. So I think timeline will be particularly handy for some of those moments. So we'll get that brought in as well. We'll get that updated. And then we should be good to go. So we'll have timeline in. And so that will update. So then first sort of stuff that I'm going to do, first thing I will do is I will go back to the main menu, because with bringing in the new input system and switching things over to that by default, that does mean there's a couple little bits for the main menu in terms of its interactions that I need to update. Now, they're fortunately very easy things to update, because I just go to the event system and replace with input system module. So that was just the main thing I needed to make sure that I did there. Excellent. So I can go back to our main level then. So we think about some of the key things that I need to be doing here. And this is how I like to approach sort of this, is if I look at the key tasks. So to do, and then done. So in terms of what we've done, with initial planning, we've created the project, we've got the skeleton of the main menu, and so that's a good starting point. We know we need to finish main menu. So actually, let's make this a little bit clearer. So main menu, settings, we now have main menu credits. If we look at the main level, and we start to think about things, we know, and this thing, you don't need to get too hung up on making sure you're coming up with the right things in the right order. Initially, just focus on getting down the things that you are aware of, things that you know that you're going to need. So, okay, main level, I know I'm going to need to build the framework for it, so the level blockout. I know for the main level, I need to be able to have the paddle movement. I know I'm going to need the ball movement. So paddle movement, so player only. AI will be one of the latter parts we add in, so that tells us, okay, yep, main level, paddle AI. So now I want the ball movement. We know we need to have the scoring in the score UI. So we know we need that. We know we need to detect game over. So game over. So detection plus UI plus, yeah, I think we can encapsulate in the UI because we are going to have the need to be able to restart potentially, things like that. We know we've got audio, so sound effects. So those are definitely key bits that we're going to need there. So I think that's a pretty good set of stuff initially. So okay, let's look then at this. So first thing I'm going to do is, because I am using Cinemachine, I am going to set up a Cinemachine camera. So this is going to be my main game camera. We can turn off any of these transposers for now, and we can control with the camera. We'll be able to adjust a few different bits and pieces, but one of the key things is this camera is going to end up being an orthographic one. So let's block out the environment here. So probably what I would do is initially I would put in a plane just to get a sense of the size of this. And I want to think of, in terms of the axes, the dimensions that I want this happening on. I think we'll go with everything having the Y set to 0. So the idea being that gravity is acting towards the ground of the arena, I think works. So, okay, let's look at we want to look at the rough proportions. So we want, it's not, I think like of that size, that actually feels pretty good. I think if we have that kind of ratio of whatever it is in Z, that's a little bit too, I reckon it might be more like a 1 point. That feels better. So I could go and check the original. In this case, I'm wanting to go based on really just large on, actually, aspect ratio is probably a good way to think about this. So I think I could go for something where it's a 16:10 ratio. That's pretty good. It's pretty close to what I already had. I think that looks good. So let's just start blocking out then a basic sort of setup with this, the walls and everything. So we've got our cube. Now, what I want to think of with this is whatever I set the width to, or actually whatever I set the height to. So probably do height first, because width is going to be 1.6 times that. So if we go for, at the moment that's 1 meter, so that would be 5. 10 is not too bad. It'll give us an arena that's 10 by 16. Now, part of the considerations with this is it's going to change what I use for speed for things. So if we think about the speed for the ball, we want that to be something where we can, the larger the arena, likely the faster we're going to need that speed to be. Whereas if it's a really small arena, we're probably going to need to have really small speeds. So if we went for something like this, where it was 10 meters high, it'd be 16 meters wide, which would mean if the ball was moving a meter a second, it would take 16 seconds to go from side to side. Meter per second, and that feels pretty decent, actually. That feels about right in terms of timing and everything for this. So I think that if I position that and I rename these, this is left wall, then what that means is I would then have a cube that one was 10, so this one's going to be 16. again, we just bring these to here. Now, if I just position this down here, similar to how I've positioned the other one, so if I just position it -5, we're actually shrinking the size of that arena a bit, which is not really what we want to do. We want to have these positioned a little bit more precisely than that, I think. So I think we go for -5.5 for the bottom wall. Whereas the left wall, we then make that -8.5. So that then means the right wall is +8.5. And that means the top wall is 5.5. Now, that looks okay, but if we think we want to be able to have it that we're detecting when it's going into these areas where it's not allowed to be, so for scoring a goal. So, and we want otherwise this to carry on like a little bit. We don't want these gaps that we've got in the corners here. So what I'm actually going to do is I think this will look better if these ones, if I make them a little bit wider, so we've got a clearer indication of the area that we're working with for these. We move them out. So I think this is going to work nicely. And then these top and bottom walls, if I make this, probably that'll actually be 20. So now that's perfectly regular. So this is our ground, because our left and right walls here, these are actually the goals. So these will end up being our goal points. So these walls, I'm going to make them triggers because they are actually not going to be solid blocking objects. Then I can start to set up my materials because we know we're going to need those. So we want my material for the ground. And the ground initially, let's make that, I want it to be a fairly neutral, honestly a very bland color because I want things to stand out on top of it. So that's all right for that. So create material, matte, walls. Now this I will actually leave as white, just because I want that really strong contrast, and that's the original Pong, that was the case. I think it was because it only had black and white as color options, but we'll keep with that. We want a material for the player 1 goal. So this goes onto our left wall. So I think I want something like I think like a yellowish, pale yellow like that looks pretty good. Let's manually tweak these a little bit. That looks good. And I do want it to be transparent. 50, that feels about right. So maybe up the saturation a bit so it's a bit brighter. There we go. And then the player 2 goal is going to be similar. But I want, actually, yeah, I think it can be the same color. Although maybe, no, actually, I think from a communicating to the player point of view, I think if we have them different colors, then it makes it easier for the players to know which one they are. So I think, yeah, from a visual language point of view, that will help a lot. So that looks all right. Those are looking pretty good. This floor actually needs to go down to be there. So it looks all right. Let's have a look then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty folder for Cinemachine. So I want to rename these to the CM controlled camera. just so I know that's the one to generally not be messing with, because most of the stuff we typically will be messing with the Cinemachine camera. Okay, so that's good. So our main game camera, well, because I've built things around the origin intentionally, that means that we're able to have all of this stuff hopefully fairly easily in view. So we can rotate to 90. Let's bring up our game view down here. So initially I'm going to set the aspect to 16 by 10 because one of the big considerations we'll have is making sure that all of this stuff is properly visible in different resolutions. So this is something where from a point of view in terms of aiming and stuff, I think the stuff like the group composer and that is not really going to help us out. What I do want to do is I want to change the perspective to orthographic because I don't want there to be perspective distortions on what's actually being shown. I think that'll be really important to have that be able to be easily avoided. So I'm going to bring this out. Now this is something where I will need to potentially, and this is why I want to check the different ones here to make sure that that's sort of working at a range of resolutions. That looks pretty good. I'm going to choose this so I can see. Yeah, so that actually looks all right. I might offset this a little bit in terms of being able to position it there, but again, testing, make sure this is staying consistent with all of these. I can check some of these other ones as well. They're all similar aspect ratio, but the key thing is that then, yeah, that's working really nicely aspect ratio wise. 16 by 9, let's mess with that free. So there is a point there where it might get cut off, so there might be additional things we need to do, but that's okay, we'll be able to test that. So that's looking okay. We've got a bit of a decent sort of setup there. Now I am going to set up a empty object that is going to be the geometry. So just thinking about sort of grouping our scene a little bit more. So we want to have ground, top wall, there we go. Now I think with these, I think I don't want, because we can see at the moment we've got our shadows appearing there. I think I want to get rid of that. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off receiving of shadows. Actually, no. I will leave receiving of shadows on, but I'm going to turn casting of shadows off for these. But I will allow the ball to cast shadows. I'm going to shrink the size of this a little bit. So I think that size is a bit too large. So this is good. We can kind of see where that is there now. I'll bring the game view up larger. So that's all right. I want to, I think, tweak this a little bit more in terms of, I think that ground, I need that to be darker because I want there to be a bit more contrast there with the ball. Because that's the main thing people are needing to focus on. So I think having that have a bit more contrast is going to be better. So that stands out okay. I think I would tweak the lighting a little bit as well. So at the moment, the lighting is on a bit of an angle, which is not bad, but I would want to check. And I think having the lighting potentially be a bit more top down like that. No, because that removes then that actually having the 3D sort of aspect. So I think 30 is a bit steep. 60 is not bad. Like I want a little bit of a shadow there. And I think think having any rotation on the Y is not going to be great, but that looks okay. Color-wise, it being that sort of slightly off-white color looks like that's working all right. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that sort of setup. That angle for the lighting is sort of flattening the appearance of the ball a little bit, but not too much, which is good. So if we look at stuff that we've done, we've got the block out here for this. So we've got our initial block out done, which is good. So then what I would do is just to, again, fine a little bit, I think, to get a sense of scale, is these paddles. So let's work out what looks good for these paddles. So firstly, let's position them over about where they would be, which I think -7. That looks all right. So we need them to be narrower. That feels pretty good for the size there. So obviously the larger the paddle is made, that is going to make it a bit easier to avoid missing things, but it's also going to give you less control. There is a balance there, because a smaller paddle, you'll be able to knock into stuff quicker, things like that. That looks okay. So paddle player 1. So then when I have paddle player 2, which will be at 7, just getting a sense of what all of the block out is going to look like. Let's give these material. Layer 1 paddle. So there we go. Now I think with this, I want to maintain this sort of theming that I'm going for, where the actual sort of item is colored tied to the particular goal. So I think that looks all right. I might desaturate that a little. That looks better. So that's good for player 1. So we have player 2, which their one, if we drag that in, then player 2's one just goes to being green, so 120. That looks good. I'm liking that color scheme there. I think that's standing out well. Good. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like these walls at the top here are a little bit too large. So the top and bottom wall, I'm going to shrink the width of those a bit. That feels better. 2.5. Maybe 0.5. Go with 0.5 for now. Just because I want them to be not going too over the top. I don't want them to feel like they're taking up too much screen real estate. That looks pretty good. Happy with that layout. And that means these materials are all done. So done. So we can just actually mark off that these ones are complete. So just keeping track of what bits we've got done. So that looks pretty good. I think that's a good spot for that. Thinking the shadows there, that lighting, and this thing, as we get various pieces in, we can kind of see. So I think I want this just a little bit. That's actually better. I think less of a shadow on it. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Cool. So this is where we're at. We've got our basic block out for this now. We've got our initial sort of setup with a little bit of scripting, and we've got what our next bits are going to be, in that we need to start looking at things like the movement of the paddles and the ball. I'm going to reorder these a bit because I think we can be doing testing before we get the AI up and running. So I think I'm going to put the AI later. But that is our initial set with this. So then next time around, we're going to start to take a look at the movement, and I think we'll be able to, I think these 3 ones will be what we tackle next. And then we can just start to group these particular bits, because I think then the final bit will be main level enhancing. So these are this is our stretch sort of features. So something to do with enhancing. We'll work that out. But that is all for this first part, and then dive into the second part if you're then wanting to see the next bits that we're adding to this. Thanks, folks. If you're looking for the code for the project, then in the description below, you'll find a link to the GitHub. And on the GitHub, I've got the code for this project and for all of the other projects. They're freely available. And if you have found the video helpful and you'd like to support the channel, then throwing in a like or subscribing is always a huge help. If you're looking for further ways to support, then I do have a Patreon set up, and that's going to help me keep managing to do these videos for a long time to come, which is going to help more people make cool things. And that's awesome, because that's what this is all about, is helping more people make more cool things. And that is all. Thank you.